Welcome to another episode of Pistons of Fury. In this episode, we're fabricating a custom oil pan for our 1966 Dodge Coronet Turbo LS Mopar swap. Alright, so let's talk about where we are on this thing. So I've cut up the original sump. This is the oil sump that actually goes from the block down into the pickup of the oil pan. And I basically have 3 sections, so this is the piece that comes out of the block. And what I've done is I've actually put this in the car. I've marked with a Sharpie level with the oil pan the angle and the placement, so now I can kind of stick that in here and I can see exactly where this thing's going to come out, so this will help me position my, well, the rest of this tube really. So this comes down like that, out of the block at an angle. Then this comes across, connects like that, and then final piece is this guy right here. This is the pickup, and this will basically connect to this piece, if I can get it on right, and basically look something like that when I get it all welded together. So next step, I think for me on this is just to get all of this tacked, and then we'll see what we can do to do a little test fit. But it's looking pretty good, pretty straightforward. Alright, so update time on the oil pan project. So where we are is I've leak tested it now a few times, as you saw one of those in the clip prior to this, and basically just having some problems with just some of these sections of MIG welding, specifically where I wasn't able to come through and tack or weld on both sides. So I need to go back in here and clean up that a little bit. I need to make sure that I weld on the inside and the outside, because MIG welding, not as precise as TIG welding, you can't, it's just a little tougher to see. Not that I've TIG welded a lot, but it's definitely tough to see some of these pinholes. So we're going to keep chasing those down. I'll probably do 1 or 2 more leak tests after I come through and do a second pass in here. A few other things. This project is definitely a little more complex than I thought. So the first thing is the dipstick in the GTO, which is a front sump oil pan setup for the LS, one of the only ones aside from like the Rainier. actually has the oil pan dipstick in the pan itself. It's not actually in the block. So there is a hole in the block for rear sump applications. I'm going to have to plug that. But now I have to basically make a place for the dipstick to come down and protrude into the oil pan itself. So closest thing I was able to find was I went to Ace. I found a steel spacer in their hardware aisle, which fits over a standard oil pan pickup tube, or oil level pickup tube, whatever you call this tube situation here. Anyway, it fits kind of snugly, so I'm basically going to shape this, put it in the side of the block, probably toward the back of my sump at an angle, and we'll just pop up through the headers, and that'll be that. The other thing is LS engines come with a oil level sensor. This is not 100% necessary. If you check your oil regularly, you're one of those people who can do that and adhere to that and be disciplined about it. Probably do away with this. For me, I tend to get lazy sometimes, and even with a car like this, when it's all done, I'll probably resort to being lazy because that's my nature. So what I've done is I've gotten this, this is a nut from Ace. It's a metric, it's M20 1.5 pitch, so this basically just threads onto this stock OEM level sensor, and what I'm going to do is that's basically just going to come in here, so I'll weld this nut onto the side, and this will be my level sensor. And then finally, I'm not sure if I showed this in the last clip, but this is my completed, or not final welded, but this is the completed and mocked up pickup tube. So I need to finish making a bracket for this that'll mount it to one of the bolts on the windage tray on the bottom of the engine, and we'll be all set there. It is a little bit loose here, and I see my O-ring is kind of squared off on the end, so I do need to get a new O-ring before I finish assembly on this. But it's coming together. This is a fairly big project though. So just want to give you guys an update, and yeah, so next I'm going to come in here, going to be grinding, cutting, welding on the inside, making sure that I get this thing watertight. Then I'll come through, drill a hole for the level sensor, and then also drill another hole for my dipstick tube. So project continues. Alright, project update. It looks like we are finally watertight. I haven't even actually gotten to the level sensor and or the dipstick entry tube thing because my last water test failed. So what I ended up having to do basically is go around the entire pan, grind flush all of my external welds so I could make sure that there was no pinholes, and I think in the process of grinding I actually sealed up some of the tiny holes that were there. So what happened was on my last water test, I basically left this for about 20 minutes, came back, and then it was leaking pretty steadily. It didn't leak at first, but it leaked when I was coming back. So I'm just going to leave this for a little bit more, and then I'll get started making more holes that I then have to leak test again. So this project has definitely turned into something a little bigger than I thought it would be. We'll withhold final conclusions until the end of the video. But right now, we're just watching water not leak. Okay. Okay, so the last thing I have to do on this oil pan to call this project finished is weld an oil return line for my turbo. And I'm thinking the best place to do that is going to be right here at the front of the pan. So this is actually a little ledge inside that flows down into the main pan, so it's going to be above the oil level. That's the most important thing when you're putting this this return feed into your oil pan, is it has to be above the level, otherwise it gets backed up. Your turbo seals blow because the oil can't drain fast enough out of the turbo. So yeah, basically going to come through here, and I've measured this. We've got about 21 millimeters here. This fitting, which I believe is like it's a Russell fitting. It's a -10 AN steel weld fitting. It's got a little 21-inch ring here, or a bevel. So I'm going to drill a, not 21-inch, 21 millimeter. So I'm going to drill a 21 millimeter hole in the pan, so it'll sit in there. I'll weld it as best I can from the outside. I'll come back through and actually weld it from the inside too, to hopefully guarantee that we have a watertight seal. And then the last thing we can do to call this project done is go through our leak testing regime again. So I'm going to get started on drilling this hole, welding this guy in here. Alright, so that wraps up this episode. Custom oil pan, mid-sump to fit in a mopar. If I had to do this over again, I'm not sure what I would do. I think the GTO pan probably fits decently, but I would have had to modify my K-member. So it's either or, right? You're either modifying your oil pan to fit, or you're modifying the K-member to suit the oil pan. In this case, I wanted to tackle this because I was able to find this oil pan really cheap on eBay. I think it was like $113 for this oil pan. So as a recap, we've got a 10AN fitting for the turbo oil drain. I integrated the stock, well, the last thing that gave me a leak issue was this stock level sensor, which you don't really need. If you kind of keep up your own maintenance on your car, then you don't really need the sensor, but I wanted it. I'm going to have the OEM wiring, so that'll work. Also had to create a new dipstick holder kind of feed thing and make sure that that went into the pan. So that was something I hadn't anticipated, so I had to do that. And then was just moving the whole sump, and that's pretty much it. So next up on this is just priming and painting it and sticking it on the engine. But yeah, that's it for this project. The next thing coming up that I'm doing is the subframe connectors. Got to make sure that with the 700-800 horsepower this car is going to make, that I don't twist the whole thing. So subframe connectors connecting the front subframe to the rear, and I'm going to do that completely custom and DIY like we're doing everything else in the project. Following that, we've got the fuel system to take care of, the whole exhaust, while I've got the car up in the air. Yeah, so plenty of cool projects to come. Thanks for watching. Drop me a like if you liked the video. Hit me up with questions about this if you're thinking about doing this. Happy to answer any of those questions. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.